It began on August 1st, when reconnaissance detected a massive Russian armored convoy advancing toward the front. Ukrainian forces responded instantly, launching waves of FPV drones toward the approaching tanks. The lead vehicle was struck with pinpoint accuracy, brought to a dead stop. Despite Russia's heavy electronic jamming, Ukrainian operators maintained control. One by one, drones slipped through the interference and hit their targets, leaving the armored column no chance to maneuver or retreat. More FPVs were deployed to finish the job.
One slammed directly into a tank's engine compartment, igniting a fire that spread internally.
Moments later, a second tank was destroyed. The final vehicle attempted to escape, but a pursuing drone caught up and delivered a fatal strike. In less than 15 minutes, a $12 million Russian armored group had been reduced to flaming wreckage. Soon after, another large assault began. Tanks and BMPs appeared on the horizon, but Ukrainian forces were already preparing counter-battery fire. Artillery units received precise coordinates and opened up, halting the advance with accurate strikes. Russian commanders, determined to push forward, sent reinforcements, more BMPs, more tanks. But by then, Ukrainian artillery had full control of the battlefield. Direct hits tore apart the lead BMP, and Ukrainian infantry gave the assaulting forces no opportunity to advance. Javelin teams joined the fight, destroying tank after tank. Over 80% of the armored vehicles were eliminated. FPV drones cleaned up what remained, forcing crews to abandon their burning machines. Secondary explosions erupted as ammunition cooked off. The rest of the column was annihilated by airstrikes and artillery, leaving only smoldering shells behind. Near another Ukrainian position, 2 Russian APCs were spotted attempting to deploy infantry. FPV drones were launched immediately. The Russian crews fled, but the drones destroyed both stationary vehicles. Elsewhere, a group of 3 armored vehicles attempted an assault. One UAV transmitted their coordinates to Ukrainian artillery, which responded with lethal precision. A BMP was destroyed completely. At the same moment, a Javelin missile hit a nearby tank, stopping it with a devastating impact. Ukrainian forces did lose 1 tank and 2 BMPs during the engagement, but Russian losses were far heavier. Another Russian BMP charged forward recklessly. A Ukrainian drone flew straight through its open rear doors, eliminating the entire vehicle. Later that day, another BMP struck an anti-tank mine, and though it tried to continue moving, FPV drones delivered the final blow. A Ukrainian soldier followed up with an RPG shot. The explosion triggered the vehicle's ammunition, tearing it apart. A Russian tank soon became the next target.
Drone operators reacted quickly, sending an FPV straight into its engine compartment.
The impact ignited the fuel, and a second drone strike triggered a massive explosion that threw shards of metal skyward. The tank was completely destroyed. Intelligence then located a Russian Buk air defense system. HIMARS units fired on the coordinates, scoring a direct hit on its ammunition and causing a massive explosion that obliterated the system. Minutes later, a self-propelled howitzer met the same fate. A BM-21 Grad launcher, abandoned by its crew, was struck by Ukrainian aircraft. Bombs dropped directly on the launch tubes triggered uncontrolled rocket launches and chain detonation. Another Russian howitzer was discovered firing on Ukrainian positions. HIMARS fire destroyed both the weapon and its ammunition. On a different sector, a retreating Russian tank rolled over a mine, the blast lifting it nearly 2 feet into the air. Modern war had evolved into a complex, multi-layered confrontation. Every front featured a different type of battle, each connected through a chain of interdependent effects. FPV drones had reshaped the battlefield far beyond the destruction of armored vehicles. They targeted logistics, mobility, and morale. This forced planners to rethink operations entirely. Timing, reconnaissance, and ammunition security had become as important as firepower. Every link in the supply chain, fuel convoys, spare parts, ammunition depots became a high-value target. The destruction of even a single convoy could immobilize entire units. In this environment, flexible logistics meant survival. Dispersed, Resupply points and adaptive use of local resources became critical. Electronic warfare and intelligence were now the backbone of operations. Jammers, radar suppression, and cyber interference determined whether units could hide or be exposed. Accurate coordinates meant accurate strikes. Protecting communication networks for unmanned systems became essential. UAV reconnaissance accelerated the targeting process, while cyber attacks could disrupt logistical software. Air power, though limited, remained vital. Close air support suppressed enemy positions and amplified artillery effects.
High-altitude strikes targeted supply hubs and ammunition stores.
But air superiority was unstable. Air defense systems constantly shifted the balance. Coordination between air and ground assets was therefore crucial. Infantry and airborne units retained their classical roles, holding ground, identifying targets, preventing infiltration. Small Ukrainian units, working with drones, artillery, and aviation could neutralize threats that once required far greater resources, showing how asymmetric advantages could dominate the field. Psychological warfare played a major role. Rapid destruction of armored columns and sudden losses shocked Russian units. Conversely, successful defenses boosted Ukrainian morale. Propaganda, radio messages, and combat footage shaped public perception and influenced morale far behind the lines. Civilian infrastructure also suffered. Strikes on logistical hubs disrupted supplies of electricity, water, and medical services. Environmental damage fires, chemical leaks, ammunition, detonations left long-lasting scars. Diplomatically, the conflict grew more complex. International support, weapons, deliveries, intelligence sharing, and economic sanctions reshaped the battlefield. Global opinion exerted pressure while facilitating humanitarian aid. Training became just as important as equipment. Short tactical courses improved coordination among drone pilots, artillery crews, and logistics specialists. Rapid feedback loops allowed units to adapt after each battle. The outcomes proved one key truth. Expensive platforms alone do not guarantee victory. Success depended on combining intelligence, electronic warfare, cyber capabilities, logistics, and morale. Low-cost technologies, especially unmanned systems, had redefined the balance of power. Ukrainian forces maintained strong cohesion and motivation, driven by the goal of liberating their territory. In contrast, intercepted communications showed Russian troops hesitating, arguing with commanders, or abandoning positions after minimal contact. Ukrainian precision strikes and the destruction of Havalia assets amplified this psychological advantage. Ukraine continued developing layered air defense systems. Russian aircraft were forced to operate at lower altitudes and edge-of-range positions, making them more vulnerable. Several Su-25s, Su-34s, and attack helicopters were shot down in the past month, limiting Russia's ability to provide air support. Russian supply depots dwindled. Reinforcements faced delays due to Ukrainian sabotage missions. Some Russian sectors became critically under-resourced, allowing Ukrainian forces to launch surprise assaults supported by mobile artillery and drone swarms. Even small territorial gains were strategically meaningful, forcing Russia to shift units and weaken other areas. In the coming weeks, Ukraine is expected to intensify operations. More long-range systems are being positioned to strike deep targets in Crimea and along the southern occupied coastline. Improved frontline roads allow faster transport of ammunition, armored vehicles, and medical support. Regular rotation of assault units prevents fatigue. Western-supplied air defenses and counter-battery systems are being incorporated into Ukrainian planning, providing both protection and offensive potential. New long-range drones, with higher payloads, expand Ukraine's reach. Ukraine's strategy is not a single breakthrough, but a sustained campaign of attrition pressure on logistics. Targeted strikes on command structures, rapid local offensives, constanto drone, reconnaissance. Step by step, Russian troops are pushed into a purely defensive posture. Their supply lines and morale are not prepared for this sustained tempo. If the momentum continues, more strategic sectors may fall under Ukrainian control, paving the way for wider breakthroughs. The systematic destruction of artillery, Disruption of logistics and successful counter-air operations have already shifted the momentum. What we are witnessing is not a collection of isolated clashes, but the gradual breakdown of the enemy's ability to coordinate, supply, and sustain its frontline forces.